money is spent and that the public is duly protected and receive exactly what they're under contract to receive. So we don't have a large body. Like I said, we only have 468. Many of those are out of state. We have reciprocal agreements with 14 states, which means once they pass the licensing exam in their state, they are exempt from licensure. They're exempt from examination in Mississippi. I'm up for any questions that you might have, but I just wanted an opportunity to come see you, to meet you, and to tell you how much we appreciate your continued support of the licensure process of the Auctioneer Commission.
Well, we certainly appreciate you for coming to present to us, Ms. Laird. And we also know that we have our chair, Senator Briggs Hobson, who has come in and joined us. I'll now open the floor for any questions for any members of the committee. Senator Hobson, if you'd like to provide some remarks, please do.
Madam Chair, no, I understood. I appreciate the comments. Before we want to get along with the co-chair, the vice chair, subcommittee chair, certainly, if anything changes, certainly today, concern for these that are should get today before we go on.
Thank you so much.
Senator Williams.
Yeah, just one question. I noticed that you had one disciplinary hearing with revocation. Could you speak to that briefly?
Yes. What happened? It was actually a county had given a lot of surplus equipment to an auctioneer, and the auctioneer sold that equipment and never paid the individual. So they're required to be bonded in the state of Mississippi. So we were able to call in the bond, and the Pearl River County was able to receive their fee.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Senator Chisholm has joined us. We don't want to put her on the spot, but I'm going to thank her for being here.
She knows all about this business.
Oh, she does. That's right.
Good morning, Senator Chisholm. How are you?
No, we understand perfectly. Thank you for joining us. Well, is there anything further you'd like to present, Ms.
That's
Laird?
it. Maybe you can make up some time. 2
Well,
minutes till 11.
Thank
We're
you.
good to
We
go.
appreciate your patience and thank you for your presentation.
Thank
You have a
so
great
much.
day.
Y'all
Thank
have a
you.
great day.
Next, registered professional geologist. Good morning. Just around the table. You can get close to a microphone. Good morning. I know we're running a bit behind schedule, so we thank you for your patience.
Forgot.
Whenever you're ready.
Did you get a copy, man?
I think we all have copies. Good morning. My name is Angela Turner Ford, and we thank you all for coming to be before us this morning. I'll allow the senators who are here to introduce themselves, please. Of course, who needs no introduction? And our analyst, Mr. William Collins. Yes. So please introduce yourselves and proceed.
I'm James Starnes. I'm president of the board of the Mississippi State Board of Registered Professional Geologists. Executive Director.
Zachary Musselman, Executive Director of the Mississippi State Board of Registered Professionals.
We regulate geology to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of the state of Mississippi. Geology is the basis of the environment, but key thing also that is not run is mine. So resources are important to protect, as well as having the qualified individual doing that work in the state of Mississippi throughout practice of geology. We're a very, very small board. our only employee is our executive director. What we're looking for, it has to be done through the legislature that we can't do through state personnel, is we're looking for 3% salary increase for the executive director. And the executive directors are not covered underneath the SEC squared realignment. That's what it's going to do. It's going to be bringing the salary up, increase to 96,798. That's salary and fringe. And the increase will allow the board to offer a starting salary of 72,840, which is a 3% increase above the Mississippi State Personnel Board's job reclass that was done in 2020.
Do you have any, is there any other follow-up or any other information you'd like to present to us?
No, that's all.
And I think I remember seeing Mr. Musselman before. How long have you been with the agency?
This is just my second year.
Second year. So you came before us last year, I believe. Yes, I think I remember you from that time. Are there any questions from any of the members of the committee? Senator Hobson, Mr. Chairman.
I'm curious what kind of issues or geology.
Well, I think at the moment the concerns with the board has to do with the number of registrants. Geology state of Mississippi. What just half of those registrants getting younger geologists.
Shift here for us. Oil and gas is always changing. Except for oil and gas forward for. She's a geologist who actually did some of the initial exploration, initial work. Water for their register.
Yeah, specifically, geology specifically, are not covered under many of them are registered, which allows them to practice in various other aspects of the business. But as far as what we do as far as the state of Mississippi, our geological situation is specific to the state. And our geologic practice is set up as a start out as a GIT, working under a geologist for 4 years, and I take the boards, be practicing. And those, that mentorship allows within the various sub-disciplines and the different various aspects of the discipline itself. Geology is the study of the earth, so it does cover the environment, it does cover the mineral resources. It does cover things like city planning. It does cover things like hydrogeology, water. It covers quite a broad range of subjects. Well, having folks in Mississippi that are trained in Mississippi, registered in Mississippi, allows for the right people at the right place at the right time. But what is happening though is with also with the broader sciences is getting young individuals involved in science. And geology covers such a broad range of the sciences, as far as chemistry, biology, as far as paleontology is concerned. So it basically covers all the different sub-disciplines of many of the other sciences. And getting folks interested in being a geologist within the state is something that we want to try to increase the numbers on, because it does, really has to do with our
Thank you. Let me ask you a question about the request for the salary increase. Have you all compared the current salary to that of executive directors in other states? And if so, how does it compare to those?
That's not good. I struggle to find that. It's not always apples to apples. What's different with the Mississippi board here is that I'm required to be an RPG, registered with the state. geologists in other states don't necessarily have an out.
And with I would say geologist organizations in other states, do they typically consist of one full-time employee?
I know Alabama has at least 3 employees. That's 2 or 3 as well. Similar boards. I believe Tennessee is more of under an umbrella of an occupational licensing group, so there's not necessarily just a geology board in Tennessee. I'm not sure about Arkansas.
So is that perhaps part of the basis for the request for the increase, that you're performing the function as an individual as opposed to other states that have somewhat of a workforce or support? Thank you. Are there any other questions from the members of the committee? Well, thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate you for being here today. Did you have anything? Did you have any questions? Okay. Who are we on? That was geologist. We're going to oil and gas now. Okay,
I'm good. I'll sit over here.
okay. Good morning. Oil and Gas Board. Okay. We'll let you get settled. We do well, they're next after oil and gas. We'll let you slow down. We know that we're behind schedule, so just relax. Thank you.
Come sit up here. We're not going to bite you.
Sure. I'll be happy.
Good morning. Are you ready now? Then if you are, if you need more time, let us know.
I'm good.
Okay, my name is Angela Turner Ford, and I will allow the senators to introduce themselves, and then we'll allow you to introduce yourself and go into your presentation.
Fantastic.
Scott Land, District 50. Harrison County.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to meet you all. My name is Jess New. I'm the Executive Director of the State Oil and Gas Board.
Did you put your last name?
New.
New.
NW. Yes,
Okay,
First
thank
name
you.
Jess.
Thank you.
JESS. You'll have to forgive me. I'm fighting sinus, non-COVID related sinus stuff. I won't take up much of your time this morning. I'm here, as you know, to present our budget request for fiscal year 23. And on behalf of the Oil and Gas Board, we are requesting level funding from our FY 2022 budget allocation. I don't know how familiar y'all are with the Oil and Gas Board and what we do, but we are basically the state's regulatory agency for oil and gas drilling and production. We regulate most all on-site drilling and production applications with the exception of pipelines, which is covered by the Public Service Commission. I've got a staff of 33 employees. 8 of those 33 are field inspectors who are scattered out through the state. There are boots on the ground who are in charge of the on-site regulatory review to ensure compliance with professional industry standards, mechanical integrity, environmental issues, what have you. And they work hand in hand with
they're contemporaries at DEQ to ensure compliance with oil and gas operations. The rest of my staff are on site. We're just down High Street there. We've got 5 different departments, each of which work together but are exclusive to some degree. In 2016, so the Oil and Gas Board has historically operated as what we refer to as a special fund agency. From its inception, the agency operated on revenues generated exclusively by the oil and gas industry. And those revenues were primarily generated by the collection of maintenance fees, which are assessed on the production and sales of oil and gas. In 2016, the agency was reclassified to a general fund agency. And then in 2018 was once again reclassified back to a special fund agency. So since 2018, 2019, we have been engaged in an effort to try and reestablish ourselves as a quote special fund agency operating exclusively off of monies generated by the oil and gas industry. That has proven to take a little bit longer than what we would like. Whenever we were reclassified back in 1819, we committed at that point to get back to being a special fund agency, not needing a general fund allocation as soon as possible. On the long sheet that I presented to you, what this sheet shows is basically our appropriations over the course of the last 5 years there at the top from 2018 through what we're requesting this year for FY23. If you go down there on the left, that's basically our revenue collections over the course of the last 10 years. If you'll notice in 16 through 19, the oil and gas industry got hit pretty hard and our production halted basically, and which directly impacted our revenue collection. So you see a pretty significant drop in our revenue collections, 16, 17, 18 through 19, and obviously in 20 COVID hit. So it has slowed our ability to transition back to being a special fund agency. We are starting to see a positive uptick in the industry, which will have a positive correlation to our ability to once again become a special fund agency. But because of the volatility with the industry, Mother Nature, COVID, et cetera, it's just taking us a little bit more time. But we are trending in the right direction. If you'll notice there at the bottom, the Oil and Gas Conservation Fund, which is what we just refer to as our special fund, since we were reclassified as a special fund agency, we have built up just under $4 million in that fund. So, you know, we're on the right track. And if you notice just below that, we have a separate fund, which is our plugging fund, which is the monies, those are the monies that we use to plug orphan and abandoned wells throughout the state and do other miscellaneous field work using that fund. Those funds are generated. We collect an annual assessment on the unplugged well fee, fines, and other assessments go into the plugging fund, which is a separate fund altogether from our operational fund. On the other sheet, it's just, it sets out our request. Once again, we're requesting level funding from last year. I truly believe, and again, the caveat that just the health of the industry and COVID will have some impact, but I truly believe if we can get one more year of some general fund appropriation, that by next year we'll be well on our way to once again being a special fund agency. I've highlighted what we've received the last several years on this sheet as well, to reflect the general, where we sit right now with our quote special fund balance and where we sit with our emergency plugging fund. And then there at the end, we always have an issue, like I said, with our field inspectors scattered throughout the state. Trucks are a constant problem. We need to be able to purchase 2 new fleet trucks this year for our field inspectors. We're getting to the point with both of these trucks that we need to replace that they're both going to be past the 7-year, 150,000 mile mark by the end of the summer. And we're spending more money right now to keep them on the road and in the field than it's worth. I know I blew it through that pretty fast, and I'm happy to answer any questions or address any issues that need discussion.
Any of the members of the committee have any questions? Senator Williams, I'm not excluding you. Did you have any questions? If you could go back just for a moment to the plugging fund
Yes, ma'am.
balance that you referenced. So the way, I guess, the classification of the agency from general fund to special fund is progressing as you all anticipated,
Slower.
slower?
It has progressed a little bit slower than what we anticipated. We knew the industry was bad and trying to bounce back. We didn't anticipate COVID 3 or 4 years ago.
Right. And so with the plugging fund, is that providing you all, I guess, the resources or the collections that you need?
So the plugging fund, the monies in the plugging fund, we can only use for field operations, plugging wells. We'll have situations quite often where you'll have a landowner who's clearing timber, for instance, and they will come up, there'll be an exposed wellhead or some sort of old antiquated oil and gas structure that they will come upon in their, whatever they're doing out there on their property. We can use those monies to remediate the property, properly cut off and plug those wellheads and any other abandoned equipment out there. But the plugging fund monies can only be used for field operations. I can't use that for salaries or anything like that. So it's 2 separate funds.
And so are you using the funds? Is there a use for those funds related to, what is it, orphan wells? I think you mentioned,
Yes, ma'am.
okay.
Abandoned wells. So yes, ma'am, we right now we have 15 wells that we've identified as orphan and abandoned wells. And we typically are able to get 2 bid packages out a year in an effort to try to plug those wells. We try to divide them up geographically by location. There's only 3 or 4 operators in the state that historically have submitted bid packages to us to plug these wells. So I came over to the board in 2018 and we've consistently plugged at least 5 to 7 wells every year, sometimes a little bit more. I think the first year we plugged 10, but that's an ongoing effort every year. The hard part is identifying the wells, and then it's just Mother Nature dictates, when we can get out there. And the first couple of years, the availability of funds did as well, but we're definitely using that money to plug what we can. The good thing about being able, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, about being able to use our own plugging fund monies, there's no cutoff. So we received, I think we had access to $1 million. The first 2 years we were reclassified as a special fund agency through another fund to plug wells. But we had to get that work done by June 30th every year, which presented a logistical problem when you run into the spring rains and things like that. Now that we're building our fund back up and we have annual access to those funds, logistically, it's a little bit easier for us to time our bids and get them out there and get the work done.
Okay. Senator Delano, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm curious, I'm not familiar with this process, but if someone goes and gets a well or a permit for a well, they do it at DEQ?
No, the oil and gas wells are through us.
Okay. So then you have a responsible party that's listed on there. These orphan wells that you're speaking of, what's the history of those?
It's varied. We'll come across wells or we'll get notified about wells, and it's not always a well. It might be abandoned infrastructure, tanks, trucks, just scrap, that's just left out in the middle of nowhere decades ago that we hear about, and we can do something about it when we hear about it.
Do you have any recovery model to try to get back to the landowner or the responsible party or anything like that? To hold them responsible for it?
If we know who the operator is. Now, for instance, right now, a lot of the active orphan wells that we have on our list now are companies who in the last few years have just gone out of business. And so when they are no longer able to operate the well as a reasonably prudent operator, or they can't maintain their financial responsibility, the board will orphan that well. And whenever we orphan that well, then we issue bids for the plugging of that well. And part of that plugging process includes a method to remediate the property back to its natural condition. But that, a lot of times with any surface work done on that, it's a private contract done between the plugging operator and the landowner. We kind of facilitate that, but it's outside of, we make sure it's done the right way, but the terms of that remediation are between the operator and the landowner.
All right, I've got other questions. I'll just wait because it doesn't have anything to do with the budget. Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome. I have one final question then, because I don't quite understand. How is the plugging fund balance funded? I mean,
So every year, in June of every year, operators are required to pay a $100 per well fee for each of their wells. And that money goes into our plugging fund. Anytime we assess any kind of fine for non-compliance, whatever that non-compliance may be, that money goes into the plugging fund. And we've got a lot of wells in the state of Mississippi, so those monies, that $2.1 million is money that has been generated just in the last couple of years since we returned to a special fund agency. But to answer your question, the annual unplugged well fee and fines and some other miscellaneous assessments for what fund, the plugging fund.
Senator Delano.
Okay, if I'm an oil or gas company and I want to get a permit for a well, how much does that permit cost?
Generally, just for a basic oil and gas well, $600.
Okay, and of that, $100 of that goes to the plug fund?
The $100 is totally separate. So
Okay, so it would be $600 plus another $100?
at a minimum. So if you're an operator and you want to operate a well, or you want a permit to drill a well, you will file the paperwork with us and give us a $600 check. Then if you've got 10 wells that you're operating from that point forward, every year in June, you're going to have to pay $100 for each of those 10 wells.
Okay.
So you don't pay the $100 when you get your permit. It's an annual assessment later on in the year.
Okay, after the fact. Okay. What's the average life of a well?
There's
I mean, it varies greatly,
yes,
correct?
sir. Yes, sir.
Are you capped at that $100 by statute?
Yes, it is in the statute right now.
Okay.
Are there any other questions or any comments that you'd like to make in light of the questions? Mr. Newt?
No, ma'am. I think I'm good.
Okay, well, thank you. If that's all, nothing more from the members, we thank you for presenting to us this morning. And please let us know if there's anything that we can do to assist further.
Thank you very much. If y'all have any other questions that arise after today, I'm happy to address them.
May I have your number?
Yes, sir. So 601-576-4920. That's my direct line. Yes. Thank you. Y'all have a good day.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. It seems like it'd be logical to assess a sliding scale.
That's right.
Like for the first 5 years, it would be a $200 assessment or a $300 assessment. And then after that 5 years, it goes to a $200. And then after, if a well lasts for a longer period of time, then we go to $100 and bleed off.
That's a discussion that may need to be had, because if the life of the well prolongs,
Yeah.
the integrity of the well prolongs, and it's going to be more expensive to plug.
Yeah.
Something.
Well, either way, but still, your highest risks are those on the first day, because if they don't produce, then
That's right.
they're gonna quote unquote abandon them.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Morning.
Jump on in.
Right here. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Senator, for hospitality. Let us come in. Eddie Williams, my deputy director, is going to hand out just a PowerPoint, brief PowerPoint to hit some high points that
Sure.
we'll go over.
Thank you. We'll let everyone get settled. Y'all ready? Good morning. So we'll start by allowing my name is Angela Turner Ford, and we will allow the members of the committee to introduce themselves, and then we will pass the microphone on to you to present to us.
Scott.
And our analyst,
Tina Carter.
Tina
Yes,
Carter.
sir.
Okay.
All right. Well, my name is Jay McDaniel. I'm the executive director of the Mississippi Gaming Commission. With me is my deputy director, Eddie Williams. It's a pleasure to be here.
my predecessor retired this past summer. Alan Godfrey was the former director. I was his deputy for 10 years and took over for him at the end of the summer. So this is my first legislative session as executive director. I thought it'd be appropriate to come in, let you know why we've asked for the appropriation we have. So what we've handed out is just a brief presentation. I'll just kind of go through it, give you a little background on what we're asking for and why we've asked for the budget requests we have, and then obviously open to any questions. But if you all have any questions while I'm walking through this, please let me know. So most of you probably know our primary mission, but I felt it good to lay that out. You know, we are tasked with enforcing the provisions of primarily three statutes: the Gaming Control Act, which regulates our commercial casinos; the Charitable Bingo Law, which allows for charitable gaming in bingo halls across the state; and then the Fantasy Contest Act, which was a more recent enacted in 2017. As part of that, as put in those acts, we are to ensure that licensed gaming is conducted honestly and competitively, and that we keep it free from criminal and corrupt development. Since the Gaming Commission was founded in '93, I believe that's been done very well in the state, and that's because we have not only a good, strong regulatory presence, but good operators as well that understand the law and how they're supposed to operate. We do also investigate and help prosecute illegal gaming. Most of those fall under just general criminal statutes, but we assist. We try and take out any kind of organization that's being in direct competition to our licensed casinos. Our areas of operation on the next slide, basically we regulate 26 licensed casinos, which are in 7 counties of our state along the river and the Gulf Coast. We have 54 charitable bingo halls that is in 28 different counties. We have 70 manufacturers and distributors of various gaming products and services that we license, slot machine manufacturers, table games, things like that, and then 6 licensed fantasy contest operators. A brief, just what our staff does: they have to review applications of gaming employees. They have to be permitted. We license the not only the companies, but the officers and executives of those companies. We facilitate anything on a gaming floor that the casinos might want to put in or change. We have our agents go out and conduct inspections, investigate disputes among patrons, and obviously criminal acts on the casino floor. So the next page is our actual budget request, just a very summarized snapshot. On the left is what our actual budget appropriation is for this year, the 9.195 million. Our request this year is 10.262 million. As you'll note there in the summary, primarily that is in that salaries category at the top. We're asking for about $1 million more in salaries. And the reason is, I'll get into in the next slide, but essentially we've got a very strong staff. The commission, as I said, was established in '93. A lot of people came in the early '90s and mid '90s to this agency, and a lot of them are still there, but they are now retirement eligible. We're getting close to that point. We're going to lose some quality staff. As a result, what we've been able to do is, as we've lost people in the last few years, my predecessor, we have people that are eligible for benchmarks, promotions, but when we don't have the funding to do it, when someone leaves, you kind of have to use that money for that. So we just haven't replaced a lot of staff in the last few years. If you'll turn to the next page, we'll kind of look at that prior year's budget comparison. So the top is our appropriation since 2012, and as you'll see, we used to get about 10 to 10.2 million. In 2016, actually got 10.7 million. And then that was the year there were some cuts. It was lean those years, and we kind of dropped to where we are now, this 9.2 to 8.5. We've been operating at that for the last 5 years. In correlation with that, we've had these PIN allocations, which is maintained between 131 and 121. Right now, we're allocated 121 pins, but we only have 99. Actually, it's actually 98 now. We just had someone retire. So these pins field has decreased, as you'll see, basically to a point that we're kind of at a critical level where I feel we need to beef up our staff. But our current appropriation is really just.
May I ask a question? I mean, do you attribute the loss of reduction in pins or loss of employees to anything in particular?
I really don't. We have a pretty low turnover rate. It's just been kind of a gradual people leaving for mainly retirement purposes, to be honest with you. We had a lot in the last 3 to 4 years retire. And we've got 30% of our staff right now is eligible to retire. And my predecessor's goal was, as these retire, we still have quality staff to kind of pick up workload. But we're kind of at that point where we have some staff that are overloaded. Our field agents, we just need more in the field. But no, really don't attribute to anything than just slowly losing people last few years.
Thank you.
So on that next page, I just kind of spell out that the request again is for about from the salary appropriation to go from 7.7 to 8.7. A little bit of that would hit things like equipment, a commodity. As you add people, you have to add equipment, but those aren't major increases. This is the primary increase. And again, it's just kind of left us at a critical level where we need to fill some of these pins to fill our regulatory duties. If you'll turn to the next page, I have kind of just a comparison to similar markets. I would in no way say that we're exactly like these markets, but if you look at Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, and Louisiana, these are markets that have similar number of casinos, kind of similar revenue and what they bring in, and the number of employees and budgets of those agencies. And I'm not saying we need what they have, but we operate very efficiently when you compare us to like a Louisiana or a Missouri. But yet we bring in 2.6 billion in gaming revenue every year. And that next page, I just kind of lay out our budget planning. If allocated the funds that we asked for, it would primarily be to fill every available pin we have. Get us to a point where in the last few years, we've taken on fantasy contests and sports betting, and kind of people have had to kind of pick that up. We really need some people that are specialized in those areas, as well as there's some new technology possibly coming down the pipe, mobile betting, cashless wagering. These are things that are happening in Nevada that we would likely see here, or may or may not, but in any event, it requires a lot of technical expertise that I don't feel we have. So some of these fields would be people with that kind of experience, maybe people even from the industry. And again, with 30% of people eligible to retire, we have to look to succession planning and have people in place so that when they retire, they can fill their shoes. And then the last page, just to give you all a summary of where the state stands right now. We had a very good year, 2021, 2.6 billion taken in. The 8% of that's over 200 million in revenue to the state, and about another 100 million in local taxes. This is the highest gaming revenue we've had since 2008. So it's been a lot of 2.2 billion is where we've been hovering around last 2 years. This year was very good. And as I mentioned, as we were seeing positive momentum, we're hoping the industry keeps it up. And as we do, that kind of increases the number of people playing and the number of disputes that come up. So I'm available now to answer any questions you have.
Any questions from members of the committee, senators?
One quick question.
Sure.
Madam Chair. Sports gaming and fantasy gaming, you insertions that work every year. What are the quotes?
Well, for sports betting is the easiest to quantify. So this past year, sports betting, we had over 600 million wagered. And of that, 50 million in revenue in win. And so with that, the casinos have also added more patrons. It kind of added, there's also some ancillary numbers that have increased. It increased visits, hotel stays, restaurant visits, things like that. So in addition to just the revenue, there's also the ancillary benefits. On fantasy contest, I have not pulled the 2021 numbers. It's much smaller than that because the amount of money, the margins are much thinner, but I can get that for you on the actual fantasy contest.
Just curious, is there a way to project with that being an additional burden on the agency, what number of people that represent you really allocate to that?
Yeah, sure. If you just look at sports betting and fantasy contests by themselves, our metric is the number of positions or slot machines out there. We kind of say one agent for every 500 games, meaning slot machines, table games. When you're talking about fantasy and sports betting, people are betting either with fantasy on their phones or at sports betting, they're walking up to a cage and betting at window. So you didn't really add a lot of positions. So that metric's kind of hard to use for that. But what I'd say is the approval, when a casino wants to open sports bet, they have to request approval for what kind of games they can offer. Especially the monitoring of that is anywhere from 4 to 6 agents just handling things like that, the licensing, the monitoring, and approval for that.
Senator Delano?
Thank you. I appreciate it. Just to follow up on Senator Williams, I just want to clarify. You said there was a $50 million in revenue that was generated off of the 600 million in handle. Is that correct? So then the tax would be paid on the 50 million component at 12%. So when we look at what is the state really making out of this, it's not a whole lot of money.
It's not.
So was that 6 million?
4 to 6. Yeah.
Yeah.
The 8% to the state, you're talking about 4 million.
Okay, yeah, that's right. So we're only getting $4 million to the state general fund for sports book. So when you look at, and that's just when we look at it from a revenue number. First of all, y'all have done an incredible job over the years in making sure that our regulatory environment provides the best opportunities, not just for the patrons, but for investors in the state and for our employers. And I appreciate that greatly. Being involved in the sports betting side of it, and talking to some of our operators down on the coast, they are looking forward to some of the new opportunities they're going to come up with, some of the advanced prop bets that are going to be, or that come out. And that's going to require, or will require, a lot of involvement and approvals through the Gaming Commission. And while there's not really been any complaints, it's just, hey, for us to be able to be competitive in the market and provide the consumers the type of bets that they're going to do, the Gaming Commission is going to have more staff, more people available to get in and approve this stuff ahead of time. And I've heard that a lot from our operators. And I know over the years, we've been trying to get you some more assistance with your with salaries so that you could fill your pins that you've got now. But I think that as we progress, it's going to be even, the cries for additional support is going to be even greater. Even though we're not really making a whole lot of revenue off of this, it is something that's going to be needed. And I'm certainly going to try to help you get to that point. But I know that we're certainly looking forward to what those opportunities look like. And then you and I have spoken. There is a lot of illegal sports wagering and fantasy sport apps that are out there, and I would love to provide you the staff that's necessary to go out and do more investigations on that. I know that you're shorthanded right now on investigators and staffers to do that, but I just encourage you to go after those guys and let's try to prevent that leakage from our state, because that's obviously revenue
That's right.
that we're losing.
Yeah, that loud, clear. We're working on that every day as we speak, the ways we can partner with even federal prosecutors, investigators, if we can. It just takes a level of expertise when you're dealing with that phone. Who are you going after? But you're right, that's something, if the appropriation work, so those are the kind of areas we're focused on, the new technology, the enforcement of the new things out there that we didn't have 10 years ago.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So let me ask you this, gentlemen, because you mentioned in your document here, you're requesting that funding for 5 critical pins. Is that it? Am I? Oh, okay. Okay, I'm sorry. So is it necessary that you have these critical pins?
Well, this is where we are, Madam Senator, is we would like to fill every pin. I mean, we've been allocated these pins, and as you know, it's hard to keep every one filled. All right, we could use all 121 pins we've been allocated. What I would say right now, if I were to give you a critical number of people, I would say it's, I mentioned 6 for things like the sports betting, fantasy. I would say it's about 10 to 12 at a minimum is what we would do, which would get us to that 110, 112. That would be the critical area, which at the salary level we're talking about, if that really puts us more in that $1 million appropriation. If you looked at filling all 121 pins, we'd actually probably need more, but the likelihood of actually being able to keep those, you usually have a turnover rate, a percentage you stay under anyway, but I'd say 10 to 12 would be at that critical level.
And so the 10 to 12 that you deem critical, are they supervisory or are they field related?
Mostly field agents, a couple of supervisory, I would say. I would just to give you a quick 2 supervisory people with some expertise that have done this before. And then the other 8 to 10 would be people we're trying to train up to be that next level in the future as we look to lose supervisors in the next 5 years.
And how many supervisors would you say that you've lost in the past year?
In the past year, let's see, we just had 2 retire in the fall. At a supervisory level, those 2. In this last year, we've lost 2.
And what about your field positions?
Field positions, our turnover rate runs about 4 to 5%. It's not really bad. It's usually 4 to 5 a year. So I hate to give you an inaccurate number, but I would say probably out of the 100, 4 to 5 people this past year, just because that's our typical turnover rate. And then, as I mentioned, 30% eligible to retire. I have 8 directors. 6 of those could retire right now if they want to. And so that's what's kind of scary. And while I've got some people that can move up into that, I need to train up some more.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Any comments? Closing remarks?
I just appreciate your time. Appreciate the support you've always given us. We're strong because y'all provide us strong support. I look forward to continued relationship.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Have a great rest of the day.
No.
Did you have any questions?
I'm not.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, we talked about setting up the time. Yeah, I'll text Matt after this.
Brother, you're.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Things you don't do with appropriations. duties.
Good morning. Engineers and Land Surveyors Board?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We're a bit delayed leaving the floor this morning, so I'm not sure if we've caught up or not. Close. Thank you. Good morning. I think we're live streaming, so that's what the reason we want to make sure that we use the microphones. And first, we will allow the members of the committee to introduce themselves. My name is Angela Turner Ford, and we have our analysts here with us. So if you would please introduce yourselves, and then we will allow you to present.
I'm Denise DeRossett. I'm the fiscal agent for the board.
I'm Mark Humphreys, and I serve the pleasure of being executive director for the board.
Thank you. Please proceed, Mr. Humphreys.
Thank you. Well, we're happy to be here before you today. We have put in our budget. We noticed what y'all have approved thus far. We appreciate your wisdom in what you have allocated. There are a couple of items that we do wish to address within our budget, though. In one particular instance, we have 5 full-time employees. We had one that moved away in the midst of COVID. We pretty much left that pen open per se because it was kind of hard to get everybody into the office to get them hands-on one-on-one training during that time frame. However, in the interim, we did contract out with a previous employee to do contract work during some of that time frame. We have filled that pen here recently, so we do need that money allocated back to for that pen. And I understand that standard operating procedure. It just happened to be an issue of timing of when the pen was open and when the budget was created by Elbow. Let's see. Secondly, in our budget, we have done grants to the ABET accredited colleges that supply our emerging professions in engineers and surveyors. We do that as we see that we've built up enough that we could possibly do, have a little bit extra that we could do that with. We've been very frugal in all of our activities. And COVID has had an impact on that because of travel. Usually the board travels for zone conferences and national conferences. And of course, that has not been the case for the past almost 2 years going now. But with that, in the grants portion, I gave a spreadsheet out that's right here, and I'd like to review over that with you. In the last FY 2021 budget, you had appropriated our third round of grants. That grant money was for $300,000 that go around. And this spreadsheet indicates what all this has went to, which colleges and which universities, and what programs of that. Because engineering is not just engineering, there's many different facets of it: mechanical engineering, civil engineering, chemical engineering, and we could be here to run us over on time to name them all. But in any event, those are what we do with that grant program. It is for reimbursement to those colleges and universities who pick up board-approved equipment. The equipment being that would be used in the field, such as drilling rigs for geotechnical, which is one great example I'll come back to, and surveying total stations that would be used out in the field, where it used to take 9 or 7 people on a surveying crew to survey land and do grading and do all the work. Now that $25,000 piece of equipment sitting on a tripod and one person can do the entire site. However, that $25,000 colleges and universities can't exactly afford to have that equipment readily available. And also we also invite them to do cost sharing. In other words, not only look at our money, but look at other money that they have in their own kitty, other grants or whatever. And that has been very successful. I would invite the panel to take a look at some of these colleges, especially the major universities like JSU, Mississippi State, and Ole Miss. Many of them have written fine reports of what that equipment has went for and what it means to them. And we would ask that in this go round, we asked for $400,000 to do another round of grants in this next fiscal year. We would certainly ask for your consideration in that again.
May I point out one thing on the grants? So the board only asks for this grant money every other year because of the fact that they want to have the money amount to something. They don't want to just give a couple $100 or a couple $1,000 to each school every year. This way it can buy a large piece of equipment for those colleges. And so what they typically do is they take in over $600,000, and I'm rounding down, but $600,000 in revenue every year and only expend about $400,000. So every year they are saving $200,000. So every other year they're now asking for the $400,000 to be spent for the grants.
And of course, this is all based on projection. We have turnover through attrition through our licensees. Currently, the board licenses 15,000 total licensees, of which approximately 11,500 would be engineers and just under 1,000 would be land surveyors. And the rest of those numbers would be with business entities, their certificate of authority to operate as an engineering company or a surveying company. And then I'll turn the rest of them over to Mr. Minister.
The only, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Want to ask your question now, Senator Delano?
Just give me an idea of what the fee schedule would be for a licensee.
Currently, our licenses are for 1 year. For initial licensure, it's a $75 fee. The renewals are $35. And it's been that way for over the past 7 or more years.
Have your total number of licenses gone up or down?
It's through attrition. It varies a little bit, but it's pretty much holding steady. But I would say from the past 7 years, or 7 years ago to today, just a small percentage downward.
Think about it, Chair.
You're welcome. Denise?
Thank you. The only other thing I want to point out is about the salaries. The executive director's already told you that we would like to have that vacant position that was taken out, put back because we're hired. But I want to point out that this board has undergone a complete reorganization in the last 5 years. They were very astute to get that done early. And so when the state personnel board came in and looked at how to reclassify all of the employees, their employees were pretty much in the right classifications and at the right salaries. So there wasn't a whole lot that we need to ask you for that. The only thing that we did in the original budget request was to ask for the 3% increase to extend into the current year. And we asked for a 3% increase for the executive director. Since that time, the state personnel board has put out a new set of salaries for executive directors of all of state agencies. And so the board is now asking that we increase the budget to give Mr. Humphries the amount that is recommended for his salary. And that is at a little over $87,000. He has not had a raise since he took over as the executive director in 2015. And so this would amount to an increase since he started of only 7%. And it would put him right where the state personnel board is recommending. And that is well within his budget to do that.
And what was the year that you said he has not had a raise since?
2015.
2000.
Isn't that right? Mark, did I do that right? Yeah.
Is this a good time to ask a question? You may have mentioned it, but I think I've missed it. With the pen that you want restored, what is the position?
Customer service specialist.
3. Pretty much serves as a licensing agent. What used to be called a licensing agent have now pretty much by the state personnel board become customer service representatives.
That position deals is multifaceted, but one of the main things that it deals with is the licensure with us is a 2-stage event. You take an examination after education or experience. You take your first examination, you are established upon passing. You are enrolled as an intern, either a surveying intern or engineering intern. Then under that, you gain more years of qualifying experience under another licensed individual. And then you apply with the board to take the last 8-hour exam upon passing it, be fully licensed as a professional engineer or a professional land surveyor.
Thank you.
And that person, this depends position deals with the enrollment of those interns and the citation to the examinations.
Did that conclude all that you wanted to present? I have one question. Members of the committee, do you all have any questions? The grants that are listed here, is it always the same institutions, or are these the only institutions that have the programs that would be suitable to receive the grant expenditures?
Appreciate that question, ma'am. We recently had 2 more colleges that came online with qualifying programs: Mississippi College Electrical Engineering Program and University of Southern Mississippi's Poly Engineering and Poly Science and Engineering Program. Both of them just recently received that accreditation. So they were the first time, of course, this was the first time they were able to apply. And their grants were, or their request, I should say, were, I'm trying to find the proper word. They were not overwhelming the board with their request on how much money they were asking for. So we were able to grant their request in full on that. Every year, and yes, we do try to keep that in mind, but we also, with the committee on reviewing these grants and making recommendations to the board on awards, we're also mindful of, okay, where's our most money going? If we have 2 programs that are equal in junior colleges and one only has 2 to 5 graduates a year and another junior college has 25, what's the better route here? Where will the money have the best and most impact? So it keeps us up at night once we get our packets in and start reviewing them and try to be fair and equitable as we can. And then certain ones, okay, we've seen you before, yours is good, but time to take a seat. We have a request of $900,000 on those. We only have 300,000 divvied out. So
Thank you. Helpful information. Anything else that you'd like to share with us?
No, ma'am.
Well, thank
Unless there's
you.
Any other questions? I'm happy to answer.
I think you've answered all of our questions. Thank you so much for your patience this morning, and we appreciate your presentation as well.
Thank you.
You have a great one. Thanks. Public contractors. Y'all take care.
What are we doing about that? Oh, we're doing medical marijuana. We're gonna invite conference. Yeah. Sounds good to me.
Good morning or afternoon. Or close to
Yeah, whichever
afternoon.
way it is.
I know. Good day. How about that? I'll take one second.
No, we should, it should be a very short concurrence. I mean, invite conference. And then we'll probably be right back out. Okay, well, cool, but I don't think we're gonna be doing. Well, I don't think there's gonna be a whole lot of discussion on it. But. Yes, I'm.
Okay. Hello, I don't know what time it is. Right at noon, I guess, a few minutes before. Thank you for being here. We appreciate your patience. We ran a little longer on the floor this morning. That kind of had us behind schedule. My name is Angela Turner Ford. We will allow the members of the committee to go around the table and introduce themselves, and then we will yield the microphone to you.
Scott Delano.
I'm William Collins, you know, so.
Please proceed.
And I'm Stephanie Lee. I'm the executive director of the Mississippi State Board of Contractors. And I also have Jennifer John, who is the deputy director for the agency.
State your name one more time.
Stephanie Lee.
Lee, thank you.
Yep. And then Jennifer, we had previously submitted our handout, but I know she also gave you copies. That just provides some highlights of the agency. As you know, contractors are mandated by statute to be licensed in the state of Mississippi. The charts on the front of that handout kind of highlight just some of the statistical data, performance measures that you may be interested in. As you see, contractor licensing has been trending upward for the last 5, 6, 7 years. And then our complaints have actually fallen off some. We've done a diligent push to educate both contractors and consumers about the licensing requirements, which could be contributing to some of the decline in the complaints. And then this is the agencies where we celebrating our 70th year. We're actually created in 1952, so this is our 70th anniversary of licensing contractors in the state of Mississippi. Our agency is a little unique compared to the sister states because we license all commercial contractors as well as residential, your road contractors, roofing, municipal and public works, and so forth. So surrounding states have multiple different agencies. I like to tout that Mississippi does make it easier for contractors, kind of a one-stop shop, and they do appreciate that. We receive a lot of compliments from the industry that makes it a lot easier for them to obtain the license, as well as from consumers, so that they know who to go to when they have an issue. That it makes it easier for them to get contact. So I know we're running a little bit behind. There's plenty of information on there. If any of you have a question about any of that, I'll be glad to answer it. If not, I'll jump right into our budget. Okay. It's pretty straightforward. We're basically asking for level funding consistent with our FY22 appropriation amount, but there is an exception. Originally, we had requested $4.1 million, 77,000 and some change. And we have revised that, and we are now requesting that be adjusted to be $4.2 million, $28,228. And that's all related to the SEC Square initiative. So that additional amount would give the agency the authority to bring those employees who are below minimum level up to the minimum level, as give some additional budget authority for, excuse me, the in-range salary adjustments pursuant to the personnel board's plan.
Are there any questions? It seems very straightforward.
Okay.
All right.
Well,
Well, thank you.
maybe I don't.
Madam Chair, one
Yes,
question.
Senator Delano.
What's the name of, I mean, excuse me, what's the cost for initial license and then for renewal?
So on the commercial side, for commercial contractors, it's $400 application fee, $400 for the straight across the board. Half of that money goes to the construction education fund, which the construction industry approached the legislator 20 plus years ago to collect, so that those monies could be distributed to community colleges and high schools and universities that have construction education programs, exclusively for construction education and craft training. On the residential side, it's a $50 application fee and the renewal is $100.
Okay, and do you have a builder's risk plan that you provide?
We do not.
Does ABC, or do you know if they do that?
Well, I know that they, yes, I think ABC does, and they get that through the association.
Are there
We
other
don't
states?
provide it. We require for the general liability insurance, but we don't provide it.
Okay. Do you know if other states do that? Where the state provides or runs some kind of a builder's risk program through their contracting?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
But,
It's usually the association that does it. Thank you.
but I will check on that and I'll get that information back to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I have one brief question, and it may be more of like a policy issue. Do you, with your current funding source, do you all have the position, well, the structure in place in the event of an emergency when, there's an influx of contractors? Do you all have the mechanisms to manage those processes?
Yes, we do. We have, for instance, last year during the pandemic, we had all the things in place that we needed. We actually never shut down, but we learned a lot of good lessons from Katrina, and we have worked since then, making sure that we had things in place in the event that we need another event, whether it was a disaster related or like a pandemic related, where we've been able to operate and have sufficient personnel and the resources to be able to accommodate.
Thank you. I've just heard that mentioned from time to time about, I guess, the authority that contractors have in the event of emergencies. And I was just kind of curious about it.
Yeah, we have been making, provisions. Like I said, we learned a lot after Hurricane Katrina, and we put plans in place. We have a disaster response team, and then we have backup mechanisms to make sure that we can accommodate those issues should they arise.
Sure. Thank
And
you.
I did want to point out, this goes without being said, but we do not receive general funds. We operate exclusively from the licensure fees, and we do have the funds available to support the request.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We appreciate your patience and presentation.
On the building trust.
No, it's okay. No, it's okay. I think it's just through the associations.
Y'all have a good day. Motor Vehicle Commission.
This extra handout, then that breaks down.
No, we closed the door on purpose.
Hello. How are you all today?
Doing well.
Good. I'll pass them around. We have one. I think we have some extras here, so. I'm passing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Know that we're running behind schedule, but I think we're making progress and getting caught up. I'll first allow the members of the committee and our analysts to introduce ourselves, and then we will yield the microphone to you. My name is Angela Turner Ford.
Scott Delano.
Please proceed.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Jeff Jernigan. I'm the Executive Director of Mississippi Motor Vehicle Commission. I've been there about 3 years, and thank you all for allowing us to come here today. What we're asking for is basically level funding about $1,000 less than what our budget was this past fiscal year. In the past year, we returned, I guess we didn't spend $30,000. Some of that money that we're not spending is to national dues to the National Association of Mississippi Motor Vehicle Voters and Boards and Commissions. They also have a conference, which they put on for 2 years. And that's just some travel, obviously, with board meetings, things like that. Those are some expenses that we haven't spent. Over this next year, we do have some increases to be our telephone charges, our internet bills going up a little bit, not significantly, but I think it's well within the budget request to be able to cover that money there. That will be another thing that some of this unspent money is related to hearings. So we have a dispute between manufacturer and dealer. We'll have a hearing at the court reporters. And so we have 2 of those scheduled coming up in the next couple of months. That's an expense we didn't have last year. The matter we had was settled beforehand, so we just didn't incur that, but we want to be able to have that flexibility to be able to have those hearings if needed. Some other times we get late additions to be a staff sales event. That's where I guess you can say whatever, say a tent sale at a dealership, staff outside. We'll do a background check on those individuals and do incur costs related to those staff events. So that when that comes up, we kind of want a little flexibility. It might be $500-600 or something, depending on how many people they have. But that is an expense that could just randomly pop up towards the end of a budget year that we weren't planning on. I think we did put in the request, I guess, for increase in salaries, things like that. But I think that's in there. Mainly, as you said, we've been able to watch our dealerships over the past year. We found several that just did not have a license, a couple of motorcycle dealerships, a couple of RV dealerships that just didn't have one. We've tried to do a lot of compliance and check on that. We haven't been out in the field making sure all the staff, all their salespeople are licensed, but that's something we plan on doing a little bit as COVID eventually dies down. So I guess that's about it. Y'all have any questions?
Any questions? Can you just kind of explain briefly the basis for the salary increases?
The commission asked to give me a raise, to try to give me a raise this past year, like the board did. And then I called DFA and they said, no, so the restricted language in the appropriations bill wouldn't allow any increase in salaries there. And that was one of the reasons they asked for it. And then one of my employees was trying to get a benchmark through the state. That's one reason for that.
Sure. We hope we can help you. Did you have any questions? Okay. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate you for coming before us, Mr. Jernigan. Enjoy your day.
Marty, you did a great job. Just want to point that out. Thank y'all.
Thank you very much.
These are the guys that those engineers were talking about earlier.
Well, we just said we're gonna blame everything on y'all.
Just-
Whenever you're ready. So whenever you're ready. Good afternoon. My name is Angela Turner Ford. We will allow the members of the committee to introduce themselves, and then we will yield the microphone for your presentation.
Scott the winner.
Thank you all. Please proceed.
Thank you. I'm John Cothran. I'm the Executive Director of the Mississippi State Board of Architecture. Joining me, Andy Kilpatrick. He's the board's private legal counsel. And one of our architect members, Mr. Charles Barlow Jr. is with us as well this morning. And you do have a complete list of all members on page 2 of the handout that was provided. Both the board as well as the Landscape Architecture Advisory Committee and the Interior Design Advisory Committee. And the top of page 3 is just a summary of our agency. The board was established in 1928 to safeguard the life, health, and property of the public. We are a consolidation of 3 regulatory bodies, the Board of Architecture, as well as the Landscape Architecture Committee and the Interior Design Committee. And that allows us to operate at greater efficiency rather than being 3 separate agencies. We all work together as a consolidated regulatory body. Each of these entities has 5 members appointed by the governor for a total of 15 members. And we do employ 2 full-time employees. We're assisted by contracted attorneys and a contracted private investigator. The board meets at least quarterly, and the committees meet usually 2 to 4 times a year as needed. The mission of the board is to serve the state of Mississippi by protecting and preserving the life, health, and property of the Mississippians who live, work, and play in the built environment through the regulation of the professions of architecture, landscape architecture, and certified interior design. There's a little difference in how we regulate the professions. For architects and landscape architects, we regulate the practice of those professions. For interior designers, we only regulate use of the title Mississippi Certified Interior Designers. So anyone can practice interior design in the state, but you can't use that title unless you're certified, and that signifies that you've met certain education, exam, and experience requirements, and that you're held to a code of conduct. So we don't regulate the practice of interior design. On the top of page 4, you'll notice that the board's guiding purpose is protection of life, health, and property. Members of the public use buildings and outdoor spaces every day, and they have no control over or knowledge of the design of those spaces. So the public deserves reasonable assurance that these spaces are designed and constructed with safety in mind by qualified professionals. So state level regulation of the practices of the design professions is critical, as great harm could come to the public as a result of poor or negligent practice. The board has focused specifically on efficiency. Over 90% of our licensure services are submitted online. It's actually closer to 100%, as you'll see, and our applications are processed within 3 weeks. That's our goal, but we exceed that goal consistently. Our fiscal year 21 average for processing applications was 11 business days, so we're well below that 3-week threshold. The bottom of page 4 is a summary of our budget request. And on page 5 are our budget considerations. The Board of Architecture requests an appropriation of $356,470 for fiscal year 23. The JLBC has recommended an appropriation of $349,682, which is a reduction of $6,788 from the requested amount. The changes in our request from fiscal year 22 are very minimal, resulting in a slight decrease of expenditures less than 1%. And that's in contractual expenses. We did decrease that slightly due to a projected decrease in interagency fees. That's for using Magic and SPARS, as well as membership dues that are paid to national regulatory councils. Those have actually gone down, which is good news for us. We do operate on a 2-year income cycle, and over this cycle, most of our revenue is derived from renewals. We have renewals every 2 years, even numbered years. So in those even numbered years, that's when we collect most of our revenue, and we use the surplus from that year to carry us through the odd numbered fiscal years. And you see a depiction of that 2-year cycle at the bottom of page 5, and the chart there shows you this 2-year process. So over that period, the 2-year period, we strive to simply break even our revenue and expenses. We are funded entirely through licensure fees and fines, so no funds, of course, are derived from the general fund. And the top of page 6 is our source of revenue. As the pie chart shows, most of our revenue is derived from application fees and renewals during renewal years. So that's the bulk of our revenue. 76% of our licensees are from out of state and 24% reside in Mississippi. Most of those licensees are architects, 86% of our licensee population are architects. And you'll notice at the bottom of page 6 that our licensure numbers stay very consistent around 2,000. It's been that way for, I think, 15 plus years. So we're very consistent with that number. And then the agency performance measures are on page 7. Those are submitted as part of our budget request, of course, each year. And you'll notice under program efficiencies that the percentage of renewals processed online for fiscal year 21 was 100%. New applications processed online was 93%. And our percentage of completed applications free of eligibility issues processed within 3 weeks was 98%. Again, our average was actually 11 business days for that fiscal year. And then you have the pathways to licensure at the bottom of page 7. On page 8, there's a little information about our educational outreach efforts that we do strive to reach out to registrants, interns, students, building officials on a regular basis to educate them about the requirements of the statute, and also to educate them to prevent violations. So instead of having a discipline, we prefer to educate. We're also working with the Board of Licensure for professional engineers and surveyors on a joint committee to address common overlap issues. We're working with them to revise our building officials guide. So hopefully that'll be completed in the near future. And we're also involved heavily with national credentialing and exam organizations. That is NCARB for the architects, CLARB for the landscape architects, and CIDQ for the interior designers. Like a lot of professions, we have a lot of acronyms. And those organizations assist member boards, the states, by developing model laws and regulations. So we have fairly consistent requirements. They deliver legally defensible national exams. They maintain records for practitioners to facilitate reciprocal licensing so they can move from state to state without difficulty. And they do provide education opportunities and other resources for member boards like a disciplinary database. So largely to the efforts of these organizations, reciprocity works extremely well for these professions. Requirements are mostly uniform from state to state. And I think that's demonstrated by the fact that in 2021, 92% of our new licensees that were issued were by reciprocity. So it works very smoothly for these professions. The board is heavily involved in these organizations, serving on committees, in some cases on the national boards. Our board president, Richard McNeil, is currently serving on the NCARB board of directors for the architects. And when they do so, when we serve on committees or as members of the board of directors on a national level, that travel is paid for by those organizations, not by the state of Mississippi or dues that are paid by the state. But our involvement in those organizations does account for a portion of our travel funding for each year. And it is important that the board be involved in these organizations because they do set policies that impact interns, registrants in the state, especially regarding exam policies that could impact individuals in Mississippi. So the board takes involvement in those organizations very seriously. On page 9, you have a list of current members and staff that are serving on positions in these organizations. And in conclusion, the board is a committed consumer protection agency that protects the public through proactive licensure and regulatory efforts. We do have a strong enforcement and regulatory program, a very thorough application process, and a responsible educational agenda. And in addition to the work that the board does in state, the members of the board do affect their respective professions nationally through leadership positions in national organizations. And all the while, of course, we strive to remain fiscally responsible and efficient. So the Board of Architecture respectfully requests an appropriation of $356,470 for fiscal year 2023. We'll be happy to entertain any questions that you have.
Are there any questions? Senator Williams?
Well, the maximum that's set by the statute is $5,000 per offense. That's not the average penalty though. It depends on the type of violation. If it's, say, a continuing education violation, That's typically $500 for that type of violation. We actually have penalty guidelines in our rules that specify what the amount generally should be for a particular violation. I don't know what the average fine
I
is,
guess I didn't phrase it right. I mean, you got about $4,000 a year. It looks like it seems to reach 40,000. If I'm looking at the paragraph, it's about $40,000 to do something related to that. And I'm just curious about the word. It sounds like more clerical procedural fines than. I looked at that wrong.
well, I think this is for fiscal year 21, so it's a non-renewal year. If this was for fiscal year 22, the vast majority of it would be renewal fees and only a tiny sliver would be fines. And
So it's probably.
It's a little skewed.
$7,000.
Right.
Okay.
It is. It's a small amount. Yeah. It looks like a bigger piece than it really is.
Get off here. Yeah, so it's not, it seemed like, that seemed like a whole bunch of. Yeah.
Did you have anything?
Thank you.
Yeah. Are there any other questions? Well, gentlemen, we thank you for coming before us today. We appreciate your presentation. It was very well done.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate your time.
Is your daughter, Paula? You have a daughter, Paula?
No, I have a daughter, Captain Brett.
No, there's a lady that works over at DFA that worked with me years ago on the interior licensure bill. And
Paula DeYoung.
DeYoung, that's what it is. DeYoung, not Barlow.
She's currently one of the interior design committee members.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
She was very helpful in getting that passed.
He's capable.
I don't know why I thought her last name was Barlow.
Thank you.
Anyway, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming to see your Capitol Day. Madam Chair, any other business?
No, I think that's all.
That's all I have. So is there a motion?
Motion, rise and report.
All right, thank you.
Rise report.
You're welcome.
Have a great afternoon. You're so welcome.